So, this old 2003 Packard Bell iConnect desktop computer has seen many upgrades this year. To briefly summarise, any original non-working parts have been replaced, including the heatsink fan and DVD drive. The original 40GB mechanical hard drive has been replaced with a new 120GB solid-state drive, with a fresh copy of Windows XP installed onto it. The RAM has been upgraded from 256MB to the maximum supported 1GB. A matching front panel was found and applied by buying another PC for parts and stealing its front panel. A Sound Blaster card and a USB 2.0 expansion card have been inserted, improving audio capabilities and saving me from suffering with the unbearably slow speed of the built-in USB 1.1 ports. And finally, although not exactly an upgrade, but still worth mentioning, the computer has been paired with this old Packard Bell monitor I recently found online, making this a complete Packard Bell setup. But what is one major component that I've not mentioned? That's right, the graphics. As I've mentioned in the past videos, this old PC has NVIDIA GeForce 2 integrated graphics built into the motherboard, with a measly 32MB of VRAM and only supporting up to DirectX 7 from 1999, with no OpenGL support whatsoever. Yeah, very lacking, but it can manage late 90s and early 2000s gaming alright, so long as you're not running games at any higher than 480p resolution. You may have also seen that the once dead but brought back to life Packard Bell iMedia PC that I bought just to steal its front panel had an AGP graphics card in it, the ATI Radeon 9200. I had the idea of putting it in the Packard Bell iConnect PC here, but long story short, it was faulty and caused random glitches and freezes, often requiring the PC to be powered off completely. So since all that happened a couple of months ago, I've just been using this PC with the built-in NVIDIA integrated graphics. But that all changes today with this boxed PNY NVIDIA GeForce 6200 AGP graphics card that I ordered on eBay for only £20. I must thank Russell, a frequent viewer on this channel, for his help on recommending a cheap and decent graphics card that I could use for this PC. But of course, we don't know if it works yet, and before I insert this card into the PC, I think we should have a quick look at the overall performance of the NVIDIA integrated graphics that this computer has built into its motherboard. Now, I have already shown what the integrated graphics can do in a previous video, but since then, I've made sure that all device drivers are up to date using SDIO, making sure everything's working as it should. And additionally, in the NVIDIA control panel, I've set the performance and quality to high performance, which should help give the integrated graphics the best possible chance. To begin with, here is ToCA Race Driver, running at 640x480 resolution, with a mix of low and medium settings, and textures set to high. This resulted in a mostly stable 30 FPS, which is fully playable. I only encountered frame drops in certain areas of the track or when lots of stuff was happening at once. But to start with, this is acceptable. Next up, this is Robot Wars, also running at 640x480 resolution, but with the details set to low and shadows disabled. Even with these lightweight settings, the game struggled to run any higher than 20 FPS most of the time, especially when lots of fire or smoke was on screen. It even fell into single digits on some occasions. This is likely because the game is designed to utilize the DirectX 8.1 API, which is not supported by the integrated graphics. It only supports up to DirectX 7. And to be honest, this game isn't particularly well optimized to begin with anyway. Next up is NR2003, with the game utilizing Direct3D, resolution set to 800x600, and the graphics mostly maxed out. Despite starting a race with a full 43 car grid, the game ran surprisingly smooth, with the frame rate averaging 33 FPS, but sometimes falling as low as 20 in some areas. I was still impressed it was running this well, even with the graphics nearly maxed out. I should also mention that replays ran even smoother than normal gameplay, sometimes as high as 60 FPS. I then went and tried some PS1 emulation. I had trouble getting EPSXE to work properly for some reason, so I just chose to use the old PSX Fin emulator instead. After configuring my controller and inserting a copy of Crash Bandicoot 3, I was able to enjoy playing the game at a smooth 50 FPS throughout, although the game's in fact running at 25 FPS internally. If I was using an NTSC copy of the game though, it would have ran at 60 or 30 FPS instead. But overall, this was a perfectly smooth experience, even in full screen at native 1024x768 resolution. I should mention though that VSync would need to be turned off in the emulator settings, or else it would cause slowdown. I'm guessing this is to do with this PC, not the emulator. After these gameplay tests, I ran a couple of benchmarks using 3D Mark software. First, I ran a default benchmark on 3D Mark 2000, with a resolution set to 1024x768. Game tests with low detail ran at a smooth 100 FPS on average, whereas tests with high detail ran at around 30 FPS or below. In all fairness, the integrated graphics didn't seem to have any major struggles during the whole benchmark, although the last two tests were missed out due to lack of support. The final result was a score of 4,688. Not really a bad score in the end, considering the hardware we're working with here. I then ran a default benchmark on 3D Mark 2001, also at 1024x768 resolution. Because of how fast graphics were advancing back then, this is where the computer clearly began to struggle. Tests with low detail generally fared alright, with smooth frame rates, but high detail was a different story, with the frame rate often dropping below 15 FPS. Later tests even ran as low as 3 FPS, particularly ones with high polygon count. And to top it off, some of the tests wouldn't even run at all due to lack of support. In the end, the PC scored 2,333 on the 3D Mark 2001 benchmark. So all of these results should give you a rough idea of how well this PC really can handle graphical tasks. It can certainly do them, and in some cases quite well, but only if what you're trying to run is optimized for DirectX 7 at the latest, and using a low resolution like 640x480 is ideal for the best performance. But of course, things can be improved with a dedicated graphics card. So here's the NVIDIA GeForce 6200 graphics card that I talked about at the beginning of the video. This is a newer revision of the card made by PNY, which according to the box was actually sold in the year 2008, 4 years after the card's initial release in 2004. This is also an AGP variant, not PCI, because those are rare and bloody expensive. The sticker on the bottom of the card also showed that this is a variant with 256 MB of DDR2 memory, certainly an improvement over what the card originally shipped with in 2004, where it only featured 128 MB of DDR1 memory. With the PC powered off and unplugged from the wall already, it was time to turn it around, remove the side panel, and get the card inserted. Something I will mention first though, some commenters have previously recommended that I remove the modem card, as it would be wasting space, which makes sense. So I decided to take it out, because realistically I'm never going to use dial-up on this PC, so there's no need for it. I've also moved both the existing PCI cards down to slots 2 and 3, leaving slot 1 unpopulated, which allows more room for the graphics card to fit in the above AGP slot. Speaking of which, let's now get the graphics card inserted. I removed the unsecured SSD from its adapter, turned the PC on its side, and all that was needed to do was align the card with the AGP slot and then carefully but firmly push it in place. There is a latch on the right side of the slot that you're supposed to click in place for extra security, but for some reason I could not get it to budge. I decided not to put too much pressure on the latch just in case it snapped. Thankfully though, after getting the card screwed into the case, it was secured well enough, preventing it from wobbling around too much. After putting the computer back upright, I reinserted the SSD, and then unplugged the VGA cable from the integrated display port on the motherboard, and then inserted the cable into the respective port on the NVIDIA graphics card, allowing the computer to output the signal through the card instead. And before putting the side panel back on the computer, I was eager to do a quick power on test first. Here's what happened though after plugging the computer back in. Wow. Oh, it's appearing. Okay. Let's do F2. That is a loud fan. The seller lied when they said it sounded reasonable. Jesus. Okay. Alright, well the fan's quietened down a bit. Yes, the fan was very loud and almost sounded broken. But after about 30 seconds, it went quieter and basically began to just blend in with the noise of the heatsink and power supply fans that were already making plenty of noise. And after Windows finished booting, I saw this prompt for the first time in my life. The hardware has changed significantly. Windows must be reactivated within 3 days. I guess it's not surprising considering the amount of upgrades this PC has had at this point, aside from the processor, which is already decent enough for this motherboard anyway. And naturally, after logging in, Windows prompted me to install display drivers for the new graphics card. But before doing this, I quickly turned the PC back off so I could clean up the disk and set up everything properly. After that was done, it was time to get the drivers installed. Russell, again a frequent viewer of the channel, recommended that I don't use the latest supported drivers due to performance issues with gaming, and instead suggested that I use an older driver available on the Phil's Computer Lab website. I would recommend checking out his site if you're into retro hardware. It's got lots of useful info and resources available. On my main computer, I downloaded an old NVIDIA ForceWare driver from the website, version 81.98 from December 2005 to be specific. The website clearly states that it supports the GeForce 6200 alongside many other graphics cards from the time. Once the download was finished, I copied the setup file to a USB drive and inserted it into the old Packard Bell computer. Then I copied the setup file to the desktop and ran the installer, which began installation of the drivers for the graphics card, and this only took about 30 seconds. Once prompted, I restarted the computer, got nagged by Windows to reactivate once again, and when looking in the display properties, we can see the card was being recognized as an NVIDIA GeForce 6200, supporting DirectX 9, with 256 megabytes of memory, which all checks out. It also said the card was using the AGP4X bus, although it can utilize 8X. However, the motherboard in this PC only supports the AGP4X bus, which unfortunately means this card will perform slightly worse than it's meant to with this bottleneck. Anyway, I set the resolution and color to 1024 by 768 32-bit, which is the maximum supported by this monitor, and then I opened GPU-Z to check out detailed info on the card, including the memory clock and core temperatures, which was about 39 degrees here. Not bad at all, especially compared to the AMD Athlon processor in this PC, which loves to run at 70 to 80 degrees on average, even when idle. But anyway, if the card is working properly, we should see a significant improvement in graphical performance, right? So let's do some more benchmarking with this card now installed. Straight away, I opened 3D Mark 2000 and ran a default benchmark, using the same settings as earlier. In the first game test, we can see the frame rate was consistently averaging 150 to 200 FPS on low detail. This did drop to around 55 to 60 on the high detail game test, but that's still acceptable and already a major improvement over the integrated graphics. After letting the benchmark run for another 10 minutes, it ran every single test without any problem, and the result was a score of 7,990. That is nearly twice as high as before. Already I am impressed with the performance of this card, but there's lots more to try out before concluding here. So let's push it a bit further with 3D Mark 2001. While running a default benchmark, low detail game test would easily run at 80 to 100 FPS and beyond, while high detail tests would drop the frame rate down to around 40 to 50 FPS, but that's still very smooth so far, and all tests that failed to run on the integrated graphics previously were now running on this GeForce 6200. The nature test clearly put some stress on this card, causing the frame rate to often fall below 20 FPS. Later tests also brought the frame rate down to single digits, but the lowest I ever saw was 8 FPS, still nearly 3 times better than the lowest we saw previously, which was 3. In the end, all tests completed successfully and the final score was 6,846, quite literally 3 times better than before. Again, a huge increase in performance, and even after running both these 3D Mark benchmarks, the card barely warmed up. Now I wanted to test some actual games, so here's ToCA Race Driver again, this time with all the graphics settings maxed out and running in 1024 by 768 resolution. Even with high detail, the frame rate was nearly twice as better than before, averaging 51 FPS. There were some frame drops occasionally, but the frame rate never fell under 30 FPS during a whole race. Unfortunately, I did notice later on after recording that replays would run quite poorly with lots of stuttering, and we sometimes saw a frame rate as low as 15 FPS. This could easily be fixed by either decreasing the resolution or turning some graphical settings down to medium. Next up's Robot Wars, running at 800 by 600 resolution with shadows off and details set to 3 or highest. This allowed the frame rate to stay above 30 FPS a lot of the time, but this would quickly drop whenever there was lots going on screen. Overall though, the game looked nicer and is a bit more tolerable with a smoother frame rate. Still would have been a better experience if the game was actually programmed properly though. Here is N1003 next, running at 800 by 600 resolution and details nearly maxed out. And surprisingly, it ran worse than before, as you can see in the footage here. When using these settings during a benchmark, the game averaged 21 FPS and would often fall to around 15. After I opened Task Manager and simultaneously crashed the game, I discovered the CPU load was very high throughout gameplay. I'm guessing the CPU can't quite handle the number of cars on the grid. I was running a race with 43 cars after all. Still, I was hoping the game would at least run a bit better than this, but never mind. Moving on, here is some PS1 emulation again, using the PSX Fin emulator. Games would run perfectly fine at 50 FPS, whether I was playing in windowed or full screen, at native 1024 by 768 resolution, which you can see here in Crash Bandicoot 3. Unfortunately, there are no options for increasing the internal resolution, so the game is just stretched to fill the screen, which didn't really scale brilliantly, but it doesn't look bad and plays just fine. I also gave Wipeout 3 Special Edition a try this time because it is one of the few high resolution games on PS1, and that ran perfectly fine as well. The only problem I noticed was the CD audio would not play at all, but that seems to be an emulator issue. Even after looking in the settings, I couldn't really find a way to fix it. During testing, I also found a way to get EPSXE running on this computer. All I needed to do was use an older version, in this case version 1.8.0. It didn't come with any GPU plugins, but after searching online, I discovered that Pete's OpenGL2 GPU plugin would be ideal to use. So I got that copied over to this PC and put it in the plugins folder. This plugin has lots of settings to configure, so I enabled full screen mode at 1024 by 768 resolution, with internal resolution set to high and screen filtering enabled. I left all the other settings alone at their default values. This meant we got a solid 25 FPS with a very nice and smooth looking game, much better than what you get on a regular PS1 console. Oh, and the reason why the lowest frame rate was 1 FPS is because the emulator would freeze briefly during loading screens, and weirdly the entire screen would change colour while loading for some reason. This could just be an issue with the emulator or the GPU plugin. Aside from that weird bug, there weren't any other problems, and I was able to enjoy playing the game. I also played Wipeout 3 Special Edition again using the same settings, and it was an all-round smooth experience in terms of frame rate and quality. I should also mention that CD audio was working fine through EPSXE, unlike what happened with PSX Fin where the in-game music just wouldn't play. In the end, I'm more than happy with the improvements this cheap graphics card has brought. 3D Mark scores are 3 times better than before, and most games I tried can now run at native 1024 by 768 resolution, without any major performance problems. Now if the processor was a bit more modern, the performance would be even better. But before any of you recommend that I upgrade the processor, sadly there isn't much I can do due to the limitations of the motherboard in this computer. It currently has an AMD Athlon XP 2000 Plus processor clocked to 1.66 GHz, which has never been upgraded. The best possible processor for this motherboard might be a 2600 Plus, which can clock over 2.1 GHz. This would offer a noticeable performance improvement at the cost of higher power consumption. I'm unsure if the BIOS or motherboard even supports this processor though, as I've struggled to find any detailed info about compatibility, so for now I'll pass on upgrading the processor and leave the 2000 Plus in there. it's decent enough for now, and the heatsink covering it is a pain to remove and reattach anyway. Now, considering the amount of upgrades this computer's had at this point, let's just quickly compare its original specifications with what it has now. At the beginning of the year, when I first got this PC working properly, it had an AMD Athlon XP 2000 Plus processor clocked to 1.66 GHz, as discussed, 256MB of DDR-PC 2100 RAM, a 40GB Western Digital hard drive with a speed of 5400 RPM, and built-in NVIDIA GeForce 2 integrated graphics with 32MB of VRAM and DirectX 7 support. And as of August 2025, 6 months later, this PC now has the same processor, of course, 1GB of DDR-PC 2100 RAM, a 120GB SATA SSD with an IDE adapter, and a dedicated PNY NVIDIA GeForce 6200 graphics card with 256MB of VRAM and DirectX 9 support. Before concluding here, I wanted to try out something else with this graphics card, and it relates to another thing that some viewers have pointed out in the past. Windows 7 requires a graphics card with DirectX 9 to be able to utilise the Aero glass effects seen in the user interface. I did try out Windows 7 on this computer a few months ago, as many of you might know, and while it worked, I was unable to get the Windows Aero theme to work due to a lack of DirectX 9 support, and the integrated graphics being generally underpowered, as we all know by now. However, this GeForce 6200 graphics card has full DirectX 9 support, and is clearly quite a capable graphics card, so it should be able to run the Aero theme right. I went ahead and unplugged the PC, then removed the existing SSD and replaced it with another SSD that I previously used in my 1000 subscriber special, where I tried out a bunch of different operating systems on this computer. After plugging the computer back in, I powered it on, inside my Windows 7 installation disk, and once it started, I formatted the SSD and waited a little while for Windows to install. 15 minutes later and Windows 7 booted right into the desktop, with the Aero theme already running. Turns out it already had the correct drivers without me needing to install them. It also ran very well generally, with no screen tearing or anything. This felt very weird to see considering how old this PC is. I mean, it's 6 years older than Windows 7 itself. I then ran a Windows Experience Index performance test. Hopefully this will achieve a score higher than 1.0 this time. After leaving the test running for a few minutes, the result was a mind-blowing 2.7. Okay, still not amazing for sure, but the hardware in this computer is quite old, even by Windows 7 standards, including the graphics card itself. And that was basically all I wanted to test with Windows 7, so I shut down the computer. Then I remembered something. I was going to remove the stickers on the front panel of this computer, because both the Pentium 4 and ATI stickers are inaccurate. If you've followed my channel for a while, you may know this front panel was stolen from a Packard Bell iMedia PC, which used different components, hence the mismatching stickers. I peeled off the ATI sticker first, which came off surprisingly well without leaving much residue. The Pentium 4 one, however, was very difficult to peel to begin with, but once it started coming off, it left this horrific sticky mess behind. Grim. Isopropyl alcohol will be necessary to clean that. That is... oh... okay. I ended up putting the Pentium 4 sticker on the iMedia PC, even though it doesn't have its front panel anymore, of course. But at least the sticker is accurate. I also put the ATI sticker elsewhere since the iMedia doesn't have an ATI card in it, for obvious reasons. The ATI graphics card's dead, plus the replacement motherboard doesn't have an AGP slot anyway. Next, it was time to rub the sticker residue from the front panel on the iConnect PC, using isopropyl alcohol and a microfiber cloth. After a couple of minutes, all the residue was gone. I'd previously ordered a replacement AMD Athlon XP sticker for about £4 from Geek and Spiel store on eBay. It took a few minutes to arrive as it was coming from the USA, but here it is. Inside this envelope was a thank you note and a coupon. Along with the sticker itself, of course. Speaking of which, the sticker went on perfectly and looks great on this PC. Maybe I'll use the coupon and buy an NVIDIA sticker at some point as well. Seriously, if you're into retro stuff, I'd recommend checking out Geek & Spiel's online store. There's hundreds of replica stickers available there. And finally, regarding the giant iMedia sticker, I've decided not to peel it off. Even if it is inaccurate to this computer, it looks good and I don't want to remove it to reveal a huge mark. So for now this will stay. Just keep in mind this is the iConnect PC, not the iMedia. With all that out of the way, that's all for now. It's a bit strange to think that this old computer has had just about every upgrade it can possibly need. What was once a low-end retro PC that became obsolete within 5 years of release is now quite a decent early 2000s machine, with a fair bit of performance to offer. It's far from amazing, but it's a significant improvement. Some of you might assume that I've been doing projects like these for a while, but this is in fact the first time I've ever done such a project on a computer. 1 year ago this computer was out of use, broken, very dusty, and almost going to be thrown away, but I'm glad to have had time to learn how to restore and upgrade this thing. And I must thank all of you who've watched my videos and provided support and suggestions along the way. It means a lot, and without any assistance this would not have been possible. Over time I've got a bit more confidence with messing around with hardware, meaning there's more potential for future videos. In fact, I'm planning on upgrading my main PC sometime soon. But for now, thanks for watching and see you next time.